You learned early how to explain yourself. You learned how to smile and say you were just tired, how to apologize for canceling plans, how to soften the truth so it wouldn't sound like rejection. You learned to add reasons you didn't need: traffic, work, a headache, because saying I'd rather stay home never felt like enough. It always sounded like something you weren't supposed to want. Somewhere along the way, you absorbed a quiet verdict about yourself: that you were antisocial, that you lacked ambition, that you were hiding from life instead of participating in it, that something about you was smaller, weaker, less alive than the people who seemed energized by noise and movement and constant connection. You watched others move effortlessly toward crowds and invitations, while you felt a subtle resistance rise in your body. Not fear exactly, more like a deep internal braking system, a sense that something inside you needed stillness, not stimulation. And because that and didn't match what was praised, you assumed the problem was you. You told yourself you would change later, when you were more confident, more healed, more motivated. You treated your love of staying home like a phase you were supposed to outgrow, or a flaw you were supposed to fix. Even when home felt like the only place where your shoulders dropped without effort. Even when your breathing slowed the moment the door closed behind you. What you didn't realize is that you weren't misbehaving, you were misread. And not just by other people, by the stories you inherited about what a meaningful life is supposed to look like. The idea that wanting to stay home means you are avoiding something is wrong. Calmly, clearly, and completely wrong. It is a misunderstanding that has nothing to do with laziness or fear, and everything to do with how your nervous system processes the world. Some people gain energy through expansion. Others restore it through containment. That difference is not moral. It is biological. Your brain is not wired to chase stimulation as a reward. It is wired to regulate depth. When too much input accumulates, voices, expectations, movement, unpredictability, your system does not become excited. It becomes taxed. And when a system is taxed, the instinct is not engagement. It is retreat to safety. Home, for you, is not a hiding place. It is a regulator. This is where the misunderstanding begins to crack. The preference to stay home is often framed as avoidance, but psychologically, it is closer to calibration. Your mind does not shut down when external stimulation decreases. It opens. Thought becomes clearer. Emotion becomes more precise. Your internal signals stop competing with external noise. You are not withdrawing from life. You are returning to it at a scale your system can actually process. There is a reason why, when you are home, time feels different, slower but fuller. Conversations in your head finish themselves. Ideas connect. Feelings settle into something you can name. This is not because home is comfortable. It is because it is predictable. And predictability allows your brain to relax its constant scanning for threat and demand. People who thrive on staying home are often highly responsive to their environments. Not fragile, responsive. Their nervous systems are designed to notice subtle changes, emotional undercurrents, and unset expectations. In public or social spaces, this sensitivity becomes a constant background task. It drains energy quietly and continuously. At home, that task turns off. This is why your body knows before your mind does. Why you feel relief before you can explain it. Why even the thought of staying in can soften something in your chest. Your system recognizes safety before language catches up. The mistake was believing that safety equals stagnation. In reality, safety is what allows growth to happen internally. But the world does not reward internal growth. It rewards visibility, movement, participation that can be observed and measured. So you learn to doubt what couldn't be seen. You watched people equate busyness with purpose and social presence with success. And because your fulfillment didn't look like that, you assumed it wasn't real. Yet when you imagine forcing yourself into constant activity, something inside you tightens. Not resistance to effort, resistance to misalignment. It feels like wearing clothes that fit everyone else but restrict your breathing. Your preference for staying home is not about avoiding people, it is about preserving coherence. When external demands exceed your internal capacity, your system fragments. When they recede, it reassembles. This is not accidental. There is a functional intelligence to it. From an evolutionary perspective, not everyone in a group was meant to be outward-facing. Some were meant to observe patterns, maintain stability, and conserve energy. Depth-focused systems ensured continuity when expansion became chaotic. The group survived not just because of explorers, but because of those who stayed near the fire and noticed what others missed. You carry that orientation forward in a modern world that no longer recognizes it. So instead of being honored, it is pathologized. Instead of being understood, it is teased, corrected, or gently pressured into extinction. Come out more. You'll regret staying in. You're wasting your life. None of these statements account for the reality that your internal world is not empty. It is active, layered, and constantly processing. When you are alone, you are not disengaged. You are integrating. And integration is work. The cost of misunderstanding. This has been exhaustion. The kind that doesn't come from doing too much, but from pretending. From overriding your internal signals to meet external expectations. From spending energy explaining yourself instead of restoring yourself. You may have noticed that the more you push yourself to be out there, the less present you become anywhere. That socializing begins to feel performative. That recovery time stretches longer. That joy thins out, not because you are incapable of it, but because you are overextended. This is the quiet tax of living in a world that mistakes stillness for stagnation. And yet, despite the cost, you keep trying. Because you don't want to be wrong about yourself. Because you don't want to disappoint anyone. Because part of you still believes that if you just push through, you will finally become the version of yourself that makes sense to everyone else. But what if that version was never meant to exist? What if the real adjustment was never internal? What if the discomfort you feel is not a signal to change who you are, but a signal that the environment you are forcing yourself into is misaligned with how you function? This is where the story shifts. Because the desire to stay home is not a withdrawal from meaning. It is a boundary around it. It is your system's way of saying, this is where I can hear myself think. This is where I can feel without bracing. And boundaries are not walls. They are instructions. They tell the world how to interact with you without draining you. They protect the conditions under which you are most alive, even if that aliveness is quiet. You were never meant to match the pace of a world that confuses stimulation with fulfillment. You were meant to protect a different rhythm, one that values depth over frequency, presence over performance. That doesn't mean there is no cost. It means the cost has been misunderstood. The real pain was not staying home. It was believing you were wrong for wanting to. And that belief has shaped choices, relationships, and self-trust in ways you may only now be noticing. There is something important waiting in that realization. Something that hasn't fully surfaced yet. A shift that changes not just how you see your preference, but how you see your right to structure your life around it. The question is not whether you should want something different. The question is what you have been sacrificing by ignoring what you already know. And that question deserves more space than it has ever been given. There is a moment that comes quietly, usually when you are alone, when the noise of expectation finally drops away. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just enough for you to notice how much effort it has taken to carry beliefs that were never designed for you. You begin to see how often you questioned your instincts instead of listening to them. How frequently you overrode the simple knowledge of what made you feel regulated, because it didn't look impressive enough from the outside. You didn't mistrust yourself because you were uncertain. You mistrusted yourself because you were trained to. Staying home was never the issue. The issue was that you were taught to interpret relief as laziness, quiet as emptiness, and solitude as failure. So every time you chose what your body asked for, you felt a faint guilt trail behind it, as if rest needed justification, as if peace had to be earned through exhaustion first. But when you look closely, the times you stayed home were often the times you recovered your sense of self. You returned to baseline. You remembered what mattered to you. You noticed your thoughts becoming less reactive and more deliberate. This wasn't avoidance. This was recalibration. Your nervous system does not seek constant novelty. It seeks coherence. Coherence is what allows you to move through the world without fragmentation. It is the state where your thoughts, emotions, and values align instead of pulling against each other. And for you, coherence is easier to access when the external world quiets down. This is not a preference you chose. It is a condition under which you function best. When you are out too long, too often, something subtle happens. You begin to perform instead of participate. You mirror energy instead of generating it. You manage impressions instead of experiences. None of this is conscious. It is adaptive. Your system is trying to keep up in an environment that demands output faster than you can replenish it. And then you go home, and the performance drops. Your face softens. Your breath deepens. Your thoughts stop racing toward what's next and settle into what's true. This transition is not dramatic enough for others to notice, but it is significant enough that your body remembers it every time. This is why the idea that you need to push past your desire to stay home feels wrong at a level you can't quite articulate. Pushing past it doesn't make you stronger. It makes you scattered. It pulls you away from the internal clarity that gives your actions meaning. You are not energized by being everywhere. You are energized by being aligned. The world tends to frame alignment as something you find after you fix yourself, as if you need to become more outgoing, more adaptable, more visible before you earn the right to structure your life in a way that suits you. But alignment does not come after transformation. It comes after permission. Permission to stop treating your nervous system like an obstacle. Permission to stop measuring your vitality by how busy or social you appear. Permission to accept that your way of engaging with life is quieter, slower, and no less real. There is a strength in staying home that rarely gets named. It is the strength of discernment, of choosing quality over quantity, of knowing when enough is enough, of understanding that attention is a finite resource, and protecting it is not selfish. People who love staying home often notice more because they are not constantly overstimulated. They catch emotional shifts. They reflect before responding. They sense when something is off long before it becomes obvious. This makes them thoughtful, steady, and deeply present when they do engage. But this same sensitivity means the cost of misalignment is higher. When you force yourself into environments that overwhelm you, the toll is not just fatigue. It is a gradual erosion of self-trust. Each time you ignore your need for restoration, you teach yourself that your internal signals are inconvenient. Over time, that creates a quiet disconnection. Not from others, but from yourself. This is the exhaustion that doesn't sleep off easily, the kind that lingers even after rest, because it comes from chronic self-betrayal rather than lack of energy. You may have felt it after long stretches of saying yes when you wanted to say no, after socializing without space to recover, after explaining your absence more than honoring it. It feels like being slightly out of focus in your own life, and the solution you were offered was always more effort. Try harder, get out more, be different. But effort is not the antidote to misalignment. Environment is. The core insight, the one that changes everything, is this. You do not need to become more social, more outgoing, or more externally oriented to live fully. You need conditions that allow your system to operate without constant defense. That means fewer demands on your attention, more predictability, more control over your time, more space between inputs. It means understanding that your capacity is not infinite, and designing your life accordingly, not as a retreat, but as an act of respect. This is where boundaries stop being about other people and start being about self-preservation. You don't need to justify staying home. You don't need to defend it with productivity or reframe it as something impressive. You don't need to apologize for choosing an environment that supports your mental clarity and emotional balance. You only need to recognize that honoring your nature is not a limitation. It is a strategy, a sustainable one. When you stop forcing yourself into rhythms that drain you, something surprising happens. Your energy becomes more reliable. Your engagement becomes more intentional. When you do choose to go out, to connect, to participate, it comes from fullness rather than obligation. You are not avoiding life, you are curating it. And curation is not withdrawal, it is wisdom. This shift does not require confrontation or explanation. It requires a quiet internal agreement that you will stop treating your needs as negotiable, that you will listen to the signals you were trained to ignore, that you will let home be what it has always been for you, a place where your system can reset, your thoughts can deepen, and your sense of self can return intact. There is a kind of dignity in that choice. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek approval. It simply honors the truth of how you function. You may notice that once you stop resisting this part of yourself, a subtle confidence emerges. Not loud, not performative, but steady. You stop over-explaining. You stop comparing. You stop wondering if you are missing out, because you are no longer missing yourself. The world may never fully understand this orientation. It may continue to praise visibility over depth, movement over meaning. But you don't need the world to validate what your nervous system already knows. You need to protect it. And protection doesn't mean isolation. It means intention, choosing when and how you engage. Allowing recovery to be part of the rhythm, not something you squeeze in after depletion. There is nothing to fix here, nothing to overcome, only something to honor. And perhaps something to explore more deeply. Because once you stop asking why you don't want to go out, a more interesting question begins to surface. One that doesn't judge or correct, but invites curiosity. What becomes possible when you stop fighting the way you are wired, and start building a life that actually fits it? That question doesn't need an immediate answer, it just needs space. And space for you has always started at home.